Are you guilty of prioritizing your kids' needs over your intimate relationship needs? If so, today is the podcast to listen to. We talk all about the consequences of putting kids' needs over your own relationship needs.
And when you're prioritizing your kids, and that's your time away from your like sort of worker self, then you as a person just sort of goes away.
And that we teach you strategies on how to prioritize your intimate relationship, having a thoughtful, intentional, curious conversation like, do we do that? A boundary is, honey, no matter what. We are going to spend 1 hour every week together and to really reap the benefits to have a connected, secure, loving relationship. Stay tuned. Hello, all, and welcome to the Relationship Renovation Podcast. I'm Tarah Kerwin.
And my name is EJ Kerwin.
Today's podcast is something we know well, and we thought it would be a really good idea to talk about it and the impact it can have on an intimate relationship. And that is all about...
It is all about what happens when the needs of your children become more important than the needs of your relationship. And we certainly, we are not preaching from the mountain here. We are down in the valley with everybody else for sure.
And I think to start it off, we just wanted to define or maybe share what those dynamics might look like if your children are more of a priority than your intimate relationship, or if it's taken over.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think it's a good start. For us, what that looks like is we rarely have a date night. You know, that's
true.
That's the big thing. Like, you know, that every weekend is completely populated with what we're doing for our kids and sleepovers for our kids and basketball games and
gymnastics
and volleyball and gymnastics and weightlifting. And that just what's happened is, like, even if I'm like, hey, like last night we had the opportunity where we could have sort of gone out on a date and we're like exhausted. So we're like
I just want to go home by 6 o'clock, put on pajamas and watch a Netflix show. And that's it. I don't want to do anything else.
So it can be just
still like a little home date night.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, so that can mean like, you know, you're just not, you know, you're not having date nights, you're not doing things. But then it could also be like, you know, there's certainly dynamics where, you know, here's a more subtle one where maybe the kids are misbehaving. And there's like some conflict around like homework time or something, and maybe I'm getting firm with one of the kids about it, and maybe Tarah comes in and caretakes the kid before maybe automatically like sort of like having my back and being like, hey, you know, you really need to pay attention. Your father is trying to help you. That it's like, it's okay. Everything's fine, you know?
Yeah. I love that subtle dynamic, because it's also like when our kids, like another dynamic, they get home from school or something bad happened or they feel uncomfortable. We're like tending to their emotional needs and their hunger cues and whatever. And I'm telling you, like, because maybe you're an adult, like if you came home and had a bad day or like you were hungry, I would be like,
Take care of yourself.
Take care of it yourself. And so it's like that little nuanced thing. Like, yes, I know they're children. Yes, I know you're an adult. But we really want to help couples understand that your partner's needs are just as important. And we get it. We're not saying that kids are more important than our partners or anything, but how do we prioritize our relationship when we have kids? And it does take over our life because of all the activities they're doing and homework and everything else. There are still ways. We're still recognizing for our own self ways, but why it's important.
Yeah.
Because we see what happens in our own relationship with other couples that come into our counseling center, the consequences of it. And right, our job is to like do more prevention. And so
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's start. That seems to be a big launching point for us when we take on an issue like this is let's start just talk about symptoms, right? Because that's what drives people into couples therapy. That's why people pick up books on marriage therapy, couples therapy, whatever, is, what happens when your relationship isn't a priority, when the kids are the priority instead.
So do we want to go with what happens, then why it happens?
Yeah,
Or, okay,
I think it got
like
flipped
that
in our outline.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I like it. Perfect. Yeah. So for me, what happens is, and for a lot of people out there, listeners, just let me know if you resonate with this, but like I lose my sense of intimate partner role. Like I'm more of like a mom, like that role becomes like 99.9% like, oh, from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to bed until they're actually sleeping, I am like in mom role. When they're at school, I'm in therapist/business owner role. And there really isn't time for me because I haven't cultivated it to be intimate partner, sexy, passionate role.
Well,
like win.
Yeah. I mean, really, as you said that, like it really clarified something for me because it's not even about like, intimate, sexy Tarah. It's sort of like woman Tarah.
Yeah.
Like, that,
thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Like the, or, maybe for me, like, the guy I am is something that sort of goes off because I'm, again, business owner, therapist, dad, and that the beautiful thing about like intimate relationship is it really cuts away from everything else. Like, right when you start dating somebody, what you do for a living doesn't matter. And even your family doesn't matter. And you're just like, I'm getting to know you. I'm with you. And I'm so curious about you. And you're curious about me, which makes me feel good. And so when we're really intimately connected with our partner, and I mean really emotionally connected with our partner, we're really our just simple selves, who we are.
Right.
And when you're prioritizing your kids, and that's your time away from your like sort of worker self, then you as a person just sort of goes away.
Well, yeah. And then because what also happens, right, is, well, not only do I'm like in that other role, like I lose my playfulness, like of that like little quirky person I used to be. I'm noticing it because I'm working on this, that it's starting to come back. But it's just like, I'm so serious about all these other roles that I'm like, oh, I'm losing like my quirky self. I mean, ask anyone that knew me when I was younger. I was a total nutball, dude. I was like cracked people up. I cracked myself up. I would laugh at myself all the time. And now I'm just like, I don't laugh at myself. And I feel like people miss that, like play in relationships or just with yourself. Like it's so important.
Yeah. I mean, that jumped out at me because the next thing on our list was you become disconnected from your partner. But I think you sort of nailed it right there. That's almost secondary from you become disconnected from yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Because really you function then where you're just functioning within a role. You are the role of the parent. And there's a certain like hat we have to wear as a parent. There's a certain hat we have to wear as a professional. And it's like we never take our hat off. So we never connect with ourselves. And then how in the world are we going to connect with our partner if we're not connected with ourselves, and then our partner can't grip and get into who we are.
Right. And another thing is too, like if both partners are caught in this dynamic, because like, let's just say you are like, you know what, honey, our relationship is a priority. Playing with you and being funny is a priority. Like, I think that might create more momentum, but couples both fall in to like not doing that. And so I don't even have like that other person that's like carrying me, right?
Yeah.
And we have to be able to carry each other and both have importance. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then resentment was the next thing that we wanted to talk about is like you can get really resentful of your partner because it's almost like you have this instinctive awareness of like, there's this other part of me. And I've definitely heard you say this, that you're like, I've lost myself. I don't even know who I am anymore. Right. And it's like, so you sort of lose yourself because you're never taking your hat off, and your partner isn't seeing that part of you that's below.
Yeah.
And so instead of us looking at ourselves and saying like, wow, I'm having a hard time connecting with myself. I'm having a hard time making myself like sort of a priority. It's my partner's fault.
And again, we are talking about what happens. What do you see? What are the consequences? You start to feel alone. You start to feel more disconnected. Now, maybe more negative coping skills, such as substance abuse, right? Drinking, or having emotional or physical affairs are starting to happen because you feel alone in it and you need something.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, right? Because in the case of an affair, because somebody else sees the you that you're not exposing anywhere else, all of a sudden that feels fantastic because you're like, oh, somebody sees me as attractive. Somebody sees me as interesting.
Yeah.
My partner is bored with me. They're not interested in me in any of those ways. Oh, you do. Wow, that feels fantastic. And it's like a shortcut to doing what you really could do with your partner, which is like, hey, let's like bring us back to the forefront.
And let me just say a couple things. So first of all, there are couples or individuals out there that this doesn't happen. They're really good at making their relationship a priority. Like, we want to hear from you and we want to have like an interview with you because you are our role model. This is like coming from like what we see a lot in our practice and our own relationship. And so, right, kudos for those people who do prioritize relationship. I know your Aunt Pat, when she was married to
a great story.
Aunt Teddy, Uncle Teddy, they had a date night every single week, no matter what.
Yeah.
And they were married for 60 years and they had a fantastic connection. And I'm like, oh, I wish we could do that. But let's kind of just get into the reason why it happens, because nobody is like, hey, I'm just letting you know, after we have kids, I'm going to pay more attention to them and have a totally different role and completely ignore you. Like, we don't say those things to each other. So why does it happen?
I mean, it happens for a lot of reasons. I mean, I think probably the highest likelihood of why it happens is just a lack of intentionality. You just, especially when you have kids, that first, 18 months to 2 years, really, right? Which is a long time. You have to, on some level,
totally,
because that child that has no individuality whatsoever, it depends upon you literally to stay alive. And so it's just a normal thing where for a little while, you have to put all your attention there. But there's no
reboot.
There's no recalibration.
There's no recalibration.
Yeah. There's no like, okay, all right, now our kid can have a babysitter and we could go away for a weekend, or we could have, so I think that lack of intentionality, you realign the way in which your life works, and then you never snap back from it.
Another reason why it could happen is maybe there are relationship problems that maybe you don't want to look at. And so focusing on kids is easier and more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that can be because there's pre-existing problems, or it could be just the fact that like, and this is a little bit of a generalization, but your relationship with your kids on some level is much less complex than your relationship with your partner.
Yeah.
Intimate relationship is much more complex than parental relationship in general. I mean, there are some people who have stuff from their background that makes parenting really challenging as well. But in general, it's hard to make a relationship where kids know kids.
Yeah.
It's hard to make a long-term relationship work. And so it's almost easier to be like, I'm just going to connect with the kids. Like, I'm going to enjoy being a mom. I'm going to enjoy being a dad. I'm going to focus on their schooling and their nutrition and everything else.
So I'm going to kind of share this one for me because I think you might be able to share the other one for you.
Yep.
But another reason why it could happen is like parents' own trauma background. Like, I had a very neglectful upbringing, And so when I had the twins, didn't skip a generation, I got blessed with 2. I was like, I wanted them to be constantly entertained, always have something to focus on, always learning, working belly time. We got to get them into every kind of the best education, every kind of activity they've got to try. Like I was hyper vigilant to create the childhood that I never had. Am I aware of it? Absolutely. Do I want them to ever be uncomfortable? No, but I'm learning they have to be, because this is how they're going to grow and become resilient. But parents' own trauma background can definitely impact how you put your child's needs possibly ahead of your own, and your partner's.
Yeah.
And then the blended family, which I think you could
and
speak
then,
to.
and then one kind of more reason that this dynamic of putting your kids above your own relationship is just, if you have a blended family, there's so much work that goes into having a healthy blended family. There's so much sometimes guilt from divorce, or from only seeing your kids a limited amount of time, or being a step parent. That just the complexity of keeping the blended family somehow, somewhat healthy, that you're just like, you just don't even have the bandwidth to focus on your partner, on your relationship.
Okay, so we're talking about the importance of prioritizing your relationship, right? Putting your relationship needs over many things, which a lot of us don't do. So we talked about, what it looks like, the consequences of it, why it could happen. I really want to talk about now, like what happens for the kids when we do this. Because go ahead.
Yeah, because there's not, the consequence isn't just that maybe your relationship suffers, but it's not necessarily a natural pecking order, and can have a negative impact upon your kids as well.
So when I noticed this, right? Because we've gone through this, right? That kids will split. Like they will know mom and dad aren't tight, parents aren't tight, that I can get into mom's like groove and like really get hurt because her and dad are like totally on opposite pages. So kids start splitting because they don't trust the parental unit itself.
Yeah. And
which kids will do that anyway, but when parents aren't united in that way, like it even leads to more manipulation skills that
their job as kids is to find the edge and push past it.
Yeah.
And our job as parents is to know where the edge is and help hold it, and what happens, and this is, an example from our life, is like we haven't always been united around boundaries because of the fact that we just, I can be a little more rigid. Tarah can be a little more lax. Then the healthy place is someplace in the middle. But the kids know, like, if they get a no from dad, there is a 90% chance.
It's so much better
that they're going to get a yes from mom.
It's true.
Yeah. It is better because like last week, Mia came to me and asked me something, and she said, I said no. And she said, well, can I go ask mom? And I was like, no. I mean, just the fact that she knew.
She asked that. Yeah. Because we're getting better. See, it really does work.
Yeah.
Okay. So another consequence, again, kids, they want to have power and control, but they can't handle that yet because they don't have adult brains. But what happens is they have this like sense of control, like I can get what I need no matter what. And so it kind of leads to this sense of entitlement because, the parents aren't on the same page. The kids' needs are more important. Parents are taking care of their relationship. So kids can become entitled and somewhat controlling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they don't want to have that kind of control. Kids need parents to be in charge because it feels overwhelming. That's when we start to see misbehavior.
Well, and it's one of those things that like when they're younger, when they're like, 4 to 12 or so, it can be somewhat manageable because the things they're trying to take control over are relatively benign. They might get an extra popsicle or something. But then if that dynamic isn't corrected and they don't see the parents as a united front, that the parents have a strong relationship, that they prioritize each other, which leads to them having each other's back and holding boundaries, then when they're 14 and it's about going out, it's about their interpersonal relationships with other people, drugs, alcohol, like all of those things, then they don't have a safety around them and they feel like they're sort of figuring it out on their own.
Right. So again, right, we want to help kids have a sense of autonomy and healthy individuation and healthy boundaries. But when the couple's not modeling like a secure attachment where we make our relationship a priority, and kids are kind of in the middle of it, whether they're getting triangulated by it or they're a third in the relationship, kids don't get to have that build that emotional resilience or autonomy because all of their needs are always being met. Yeah. And when they're not, how dare you? There's that unhealthy control piece.
Yeah. And we're not being great role models at the end of the day. At the end of the day, when they get into adult relationships and when they have kids in the future, they don't have that witnessed experience of like, wow, our parents always took care of each other, that they always made time for each other. We really want to role model as healthy a relationship as we can.
And another thing, and I know this one's not in our outline, but it just made me think of it, is if parents don't have their relationship prioritized. And that doesn't mean not fighting or arguing, because couples fight and it shows kids like we can manage conflict and navigate it. But what happens is like kids try to start emotionally to take care of us because they don't want their parents to divorce or separate or even for a second time. So they will set aside their own needs and become what they think we need them to be.
That's so interesting. They mimic the behavior on some level, which is interesting because we're putting our needs ahead of theirs or their needs ahead of ours. And then they eventually put our needs above theirs.
Which
and,
they don't.
And that we don't want that. I mean, that I think we've seen that in small ways. And that sort of snapped you and I's attention.
I was like, Jojo, honey. Yeah. I mean, he'd be like, Mommy, like he would just try to like avoid and help us like me. And I said, babe,
don't get mad at dad.
It's your job to be a kid. Mommy and daddy, we've got this. But if we weren't really clear and saw that, like he would definitely be like the little peacekeeper between this. And also what happens is when intimate partnership isn't close, like affectionate or intimately wise, like we will get more affection from our kids to meet our own emotional needs. And then our kids might feel smothered, and that's not good either.
That's a big one right there.
It really is.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive in on solutions. This is such a common thing. So what's the first step, Tara? If somebody's listening to this today and they're like, yep, I'm just like them. I'm putting the needs of our kids in front of our relationship. What's the first thing these people do?
I mean, for me, it's having a thoughtful discussion on, hey, is this a thing in our relationship? What do you notice? What do I notice? But you also go in with the intention of like curiosity, not blame, resentment, and trying to like call the other one out. Because this is a system. It has taken the two of you. It took the two of us to do this, to not prioritize our relationship because of many different reasons. And we are recognizing it's not healthy. So I feel like the very first step is having a thoughtful, intentional, curious conversation. Like, do we do that? Like, when is the last time we like were playful with each other? How often do we have date night?
Yeah.
How often do our kids' needs come in between our own and our partner's needs?
For me, awareness of your pronouns, because Tara is saying that we have a conversation with our partner about it. And so using words like we and I are incredibly important because I know, at least on my side, is when we've had these conversations, I just have that natural instinct anyway where I feel like it's my fault. And so even if Tara uses we and I, sometimes
Yeah.
I take it personal and think she's telling me that I screwed it up and I'm not making enough time. So at least if you start by saying like, I haven't made myself, I haven't made us a priority. We can do a better job. That gives you at least a chance of having a thoughtful, curious conversation and not one that ends up in an argument.
And you look at the different areas. That's really important because you and I were really good at prioritizing our work relationship.
Yeah.
But not our date night, fun night relationship. So you look at the areas where you're not prioritizing your relationship. Look at those areas, right? Even if it's like, I have this one couple that they just love being out in nature and they haven't been out in nature in so long. And it's just like, just go for like a 10-minute walk around the block to just be outside to just get like your bearings on again. So you look at the areas where, you could do better in it and where there's realistic.
Yeah. I think achievable, that's huge. I mean, this is huge. Like anytime you're making change as a person individually in your relationship is if we give ourselves goals that are not sustainable, achievable, then we feel like a failure and then we just quit. Then we're just like, we surrender and we're like, okay, whatever. We're just stuck the way we are. So, giving yourself some achievable goals that are repeatable. That's the big thing. Like we're going to make, once a week, we're going to have a cup of coffee outside together for a half hour and talk about how our week was.
And it doesn't have to be so much better at
we've been sitting outside in the morning. It's very nice.
Another discussion around your children, right? So the idea of thirds comes from Dr. Stan Tatkin. He's actually going to be a guest on our podcast next week. But is that if your children are constantly like a source of your conflict, that is a very good indicator that your child is a third in your relationship and the two of you are not in your couple bubble. And how do you get on the same page? Because again, that's healthy for you as an individual. That's healthy for your intimate relationship. And it's so, so healthy for your kids. Is it around homework? Is it around, activities on the weekends, extracurriculars, parenting style? You have to be able to be united so that your kids don't come into the middle of your conflict.
I think that's a really excellent way to look at it is beginning to just sort of do an inventory of like, where are the areas in our relationship that we don't feel entirely connected, that we don't feel aligned, especially in relation to the kids, I think that's excellent.
So, and then moving into boundaries, because we're talking about how can you prioritize your relationship, right? Knowing that we all have needs. And boundaries, first of all, kids need boundaries to feel safe. They need structure. They need predictability. So do couples. A boundary is, honey, no matter what, we are going to spend 1 hour every week together, uninterrupted time, walking, whatever, and you hold true to that boundary. You say, what are the consequences if we don't have that boundary? Well, just look, it spills out everywhere in every direction. But you start putting boundaries around, hey, if we start having a fight about a kid, let's like take a look at that and really create solutions so that doesn't keep popping up over and over again. Because I know I experienced this, and this is mom guilt, but I'm like, I know that like our kids love being with us on the weekends because we work a lot during the week. And so when you want to take me out on a date night, I feel guilty. I'm like, no, like you've got to reframe that. Like, because you and I taking care of our relationship and our kids seeing that we are putting our relationship, in not ahead of them, but like we're making it important. That is everything. But I let my own guilt be like, no. And now they're like, then they start getting used to like, oh, mom and dad are always around. And it's like this new behavior. What do you mean you're going to go away on a date? Remember when we went to Costa Rica for like 5 days? They're like, how dare you leave us? I mean, so again, it's like really looking at that guilt and not letting that stand in your way of prioritizing your relationship, even just having a freaking hour date night on the weekend.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you just said that, I was just like, well, when you do experience that guilt, when I'm like, hey, let's go out tonight, and then you say, no, you don't want to, like, I don't know how to react, because part of me is like, oh, okay, I'll just chill and, hang out at home. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But then another part of me is like, no, that's not okay. But I don't know always how to like push you past that guilt.
It's a new behavior that we have to start doing.
So
and it takes 10,000 hours
to get
an expert
what
in
I'm
a new
asking
behavior.
is like, in that moment where you say, no, I want to stay home instead, what's the way in which I can support you?
So to me, it's right. Again, another Dr. Stan Tatkin, prepare, plan, predict. If I knew from like on a Monday that like, hey, on Saturday night, we're going out, that lets me prep better.
So you need more time.
Yes, because for me, sometimes like I always get ready during the week and I put my makeup on and I look professional. Like sometimes on the weekend, I just want to be in my pajamas. It's rare that I want to do that, but like I'm like, oh, I have to get ready and go out. That's like a whole thing. But if I have it in my mind already, like, hey, this Saturday's date night, like maybe every Saturday's date night from like whatever, I would look forward to it. But sometimes when it comes up in the moment and it's more spontaneous, it feels like another thing I have to do and it feels more overwhelming.
Well, yeah, that's really useful because basically what I heard there was that I tend to kind of more spur the moment, be like, hey, let's go down and, have a glass of wine and one of those, charcuterie boards and have a date. And that's a little too abrupt for you.
Yes, I like to plan.
So
and do an outfit.
You want a little more planning. And so, okay, that's useful. And that's also hopefully like modeling to our audience that, so we have an intention. We have the intention to prioritize ourselves, our relationship more, and not prioritize our children. One of the things that we've identified as a way to do that is to have more dates. Tarah then said an obstacle is she feels guilty, right? Which leads her to say no sometimes. And then I said, well, how do I help you with that? She said, I need more time. I noticed that it's like spur of the moment. And I'm like, okay. And so this is like, now look at that. Neither of us were reactive in that moment. I wasn't taking it personal, saying like, oh, you just don't want to go out with me. I was open-minded. And then I asked open-ended question, well, what can I do? And she gave me a response. And that's the type of communication that we want to have around these issues, because we were in that together instead of in the past, we've struggled with it, a lot of couples do. It feels adversarial. It feels adversarial and defensive. And we didn't embody that space in that moment.
Yeah. And really to like wrap up this whole podcast, like everything we're talking about is such a benefit for you as an individual. You kind of get yourself back. You get some more joy, some space back. Individual a benefit for the couple because you now feel more connected, right? You're modeling healthy, secure, loving, intimate relationship that definitely has its imperfections too, but you know how to navigate it. And you're creating a healthy environment for children to become who they need to be for themselves, not for our relationship or taking care of one of the caregivers. So like everything we've talked about today, prioritizing your relationship, not saying your kids' needs aren't important. I'm just saying, let's look at our relationship needs and really prioritize those because they're just as important, if not more, for the sake of everybody around us in the environment.
I mean, that's like the take home. If you are a couple who has kids, that actually prioritizing each other, your relationship is in the best interest of your family unit, right? So wonderful. I'm glad we took on this topic, Tarah.
Yes, me too.
Something we've been trying to figure out for a long time.
And we always love hearing your feedback, suggestions, concerns. We try to respond. We even have listener emails that we read on the podcast, even though we're not your therapist, but we are definitely here to promote relationship wellness and give you the skills that we know that we have learned, that we use, that really do create really connected, like loving relationships. So thank you.
And check out in our show notes, we're beginning to offer books and other media that might be something that might enrich your relationship.
Resources.
So check out. We'll always have resources now in our show notes. Just give them a click, and it'll take you right to that resource. And it's always something that's either coming from ourselves or our team as something that will really enrich your personal growth and your growth as a couple.
Here we go, relationship wellness. I love it. I love you. Everyone, thanks so much for listening. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Bye-bye.
Bye.